What's up, bros? Welcome to another Brograph tutorial. I'm Dave Koss, and today we're going to be talking about getting your orientation right. And here is the big dilemma that I had when I first started working with After Effects in Cinema 4D. So I would export pieces of something in Cinema 4D to bring into After Effects, and they wouldn't line up correctly, and I didn't understand why. And that is because of orientation most of the time, especially if you're keyframing stuff. And I'll show you kind of a rough example here, and you can see what I mean. I'm going to take a cube and make it thin and a little bit wide, and then I'm going to copy and paste it. I'm going to make a pretend laptop, because that's probably something that a lot of you would be doing for a video. You'd be doing a laptop and you would want to put a screen on it, and you would want to be able to change the screen in After Effects and put in different comps into that screen so you could reuse your animation. So this is what you'd most likely do. You'd have a screen and you'd have a piece of geometry on it, let's say a plane, and you would say, okay, well, I want to take this plane and I'm going to turn it this way, and I'm going to line it up, and this is going to be part of my screen. Most likely you would be actually building this as part of your screen that you designed, but this will work for this case. And I'm actually just going to give it a plain color here, just so we can see what we're doing. It's a little bit too wide, but okay, here's our laptop, right? And we've aligned it and everything looks good, but this is not the correct way to do it. So I'm going to label this wrong, exclamation. That is the wrong screen. Now I'm going to show you the right way to do it. I'm going to create a plane, just like before, but instead, orientation, this is really important. You want this Z to be going backward in Z space in the right direction. Now see what happened over here on your other one. Your Z is pointed up now. And you might say, well, why is that a big deal? It doesn't matter. It still looks right. Well, I'm going to show you why. If we take this plane and we orient it negative Z, so it's going that direction like everything else, I'm going to line it up. I'm going to do the same thing here. Okay, now here's my screen for this laptop. I'll throw a color on it so we can see it. That's oriented correctly. I'm going to call this one right, exclamation. Now before you take this into After Effects, you've got to put an external compositing tag on it. So under wrong, I'm going to right click and I'm going to put this external compositing tag on it and give it a name, wrong, exclamation. I'm going to do the same thing with right. Cinema 4D tags, external compositing tag, and I'm going to call that right. And there we go. Now, all of this would probably work in After Effects until you start animating. That's the key. I'm going to grab all of this, selecting all, and I'm going to hit Alt-G so it puts this in a null. So my whole laptop is parented in a null. This is called laptop. And I'm going to do a keyframe. And now I'm also going to do a keyframe at 90, and I'm going to reorient it somehow, give it a little rotation. We're doing some sort of move here, a laptop swinging around or rotating or whatever. And I'll make a camera just to have a camera in the scene. And I'll go ahead and just set a keyframe on 0 for the camera just so it stays static and we don't have any changes here. So that part is done. Got to render it. So I'm going to give it a name. This is going to be Brograph orientation, Cinema 4D. Okay. Here is my render file. And I'm not going to do any multipass right now. We don't have to worry about that. But I'm going to output, and I'm going to say all frames. It's 0 to 90. And I'm going to tell this to team render real fast because I have a little mini render farm set up here. It's going to render out these different pieces. While that's going, I'm going to go back by hitting Control B or Command B, depending on what you're on. I'm going to go back to my render settings here. I'm going to go to Save. And in this compositing project file, I'm going to turn on my 3D data and say Save this project file. Make sure that you have your output frames 0 to 90 set, or else it's not going to export them all correctly. I'm going to call this Orientation, and I'm going to save it in the same folder as my Cinema 4D project, Orientation. I actually haven't saved my Cinema 4D project. That would probably help. There we go. All right. Now, it looks like my render's done over here. So in After Effects, I'm going to find that file. Now, you have to keep in mind here that you have to go into your Cinema 4D, your plugins folder in the Maxon folder. It's called a third party or something like that. Third party extensions or plugins or something. Make sure you have that After Effects plugin installed in After Effects from Cinema, because that's the only way you can import AEC files that you save from Cinema. So if you drag this in here, okay, it brings in a project file, and it has your whole render that you've created, and then it has your external compositing tags. You've got right and wrong. So we're going to start with wrong, obviously, so you can see what happens if you do this incorrectly. I'm going to create a new solid, and I'm going to make it a 3D solid, so it's in kind of the same 3D environment that the camera was in. And now, in order to put this where that screen was that we created, I'm going to go down to Transform on this external compositing tag we created. I'm going to copy it, and then over here on the solid, this 3D solid we have, I'm just going to paste that information in. And that's going to paste all of that info in here as is. The only thing about pasting that info is it turns off the opacity, turns it down to 0. So you always have to go turn that back up to 100% so that you can see it. So if we play through here, we can see that it's in the environment, matches up with the camera correctly. It's a little big, so we'll scale it down. And we're getting closer. Now, if we play it through, it looks like it's matching up. However, it's not oriented correctly. So you would think that this would actually be not big of an issue. You'll just rotate it and we'll be fine. Well, that's not the case, because if you look down here, your X, Y, and Z rotation they actually have keyframe data in them, because it's pulling that information of how the entire laptop rotated from Cinema. You have to have that information, so you can't change this in any way. Then in orientation, you figure, oh, okay, well, I'll just change the orientation, because that's not changing. They're all set to 0, and you could use this as your parameter to change and line this up. So under orientation, if you turn this to 90 degrees, maybe scale it. Oh, look, that screen matches up, right? Wrong. Watch what happens now if I scroll through my timeline. Now we start to run into other problems. It's like, okay, well, maybe I can turn it this way, and maybe it will work now. No, same problem. And this is all because you have to plan ahead, and you have to make sure your orientation is correct. So if we delete this now, and we do another new solid, and make it 3D. Now let's go to the right one, and let's copy the transform keyframes and paste them onto this one. It's going to be invisible because we got to go down and turn up the opacity back to 100. Now, of course, that's way too big, and under scale, I'm going to scale it back down. So that would be our laptop screen now. So scrolling through, it's perfect. Aligns absolutely perfect, and that's all you have to do. You just have to get that correct so that you're not like kicking yourself later, especially if you're building something out that's fairly complicated and you have the orientation wrong. It's going to screw this whole thing up, and you're going to have to go back into Cinema and try and fix it. So just make sure that your orientation is right from the beginning, and you won't have any problems bringing in external compositing tags into After Effects. That's it. So if you like what you see, please subscribe on YouTube. You can connect with us on Facebook. We're also on Reddit/Cinema4D all the time, talking to people and whatnot whenever we can get in there and have time. There should be quite a few more tutorials coming up pretty soon. I'm recording a big batch of them. So we also have a newsletter, and it does not go out that often, so we won't bug you. But when we have some cool stuff coming out, we will send out a newsletter update, and you can subscribe to that at Brograph.com, as well as check out the experiments that we do on there that aren't in the tutorial feed and stuff like that. I'm Dave Koss, and thanks everybody for watching. Later, bros. It's pretty good, I guess.